Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Now, EU leaders meeting in Brussels are set to discuss a plan to relocate 120,000 migrants across the continent amid fierce opposition from some members. Romania, the Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary continue to oppose a mandatory quota scheme which was approved yesterday. Today's emergency summit will also focus on tightening EU borders and boosting aid to neighbors of Syria and Libya, from where many migrants come. EU leaders have struggled to find a coordinated response to the crisis, and the British Prime Minister and French President held talks on the eve of this meeting, saying that finding a solution to the Syrian conflict and also the conflicts in Libya are very crucial to resolving this migrant crisis. But for more on what's happening with the European Union, I'm joined by Susan Fratsky. She's an international program policy analyst with the Policy for Protection. She joins us right now, basically. She's joining us right now on the program. Susan, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm sorry, I started there a minute. It's the Migration Policy Institute. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa. Now, I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts on this new quota plan?
So the quota plan is a step in the right direction, clearly determining who has responsibility for refugee claims within the European Union, and agreeing on a response that distributes responsibility evenly is a large challenge for the EU right now. But in many ways, it's addressing the crisis of a few months ago. The numbers have been increasing dramatically, and it's become very clear that one of the factors driving this increase is the deterioration of conditions in countries like Turkey and elsewhere. So there needs to be much more proactive efforts to support conditions in those countries and provide aid there. So while it's a good step, it doesn't quite address the bigger picture.
That's the thing I was just about to ask you. It's indeed a good step that should be recognized, but is it one that is sustainable in the long run?
It's necessary, I think. The question of sustainability is key. It's unclear. We've seen many people continuing on to Germany. Germany is clearly a preferred destination, and it's unclear whether or not, if people are relocated, that they'll be willing to stay in their countries of relocation, particularly if their preferences aren't taken into account. So there's a lot of questions that will need to be worked out. But more broadly, I think that we can't continue to have the same sort of chaotic flows that we've been having at the moment. There needs to be some sort of mechanism to take some of the burden off of Italy and Greece and move people in a safe and orderly manner to other countries within Europe.
Now, Susan, not everyone is thrilled with this new quota plan. For instance, the likes of Romania and the Czech Republic. And the thing is, do you support the view that some member states should be able to take in migrants on a voluntary basis rather than being mandated to do so? Because that is one of the points which countries like this who are not thrilled with the quota plan are making.
Sure. It's very controversial, of course, because immigration is such a sensitive issue. Countries want to maintain control, of course, over who is entering their territory. But at the same time, there's a need for everyone, all of the countries within the European Union, to act together. So how exactly the number of people who go to each country is determined, I think, is more of a technical question. But I do think that it's important for there to be a principle that all of the countries are playing a role and taking responsibility.
Now, we've looked at some of the conditions, economically speaking, regarding these destination countries, for instance, like Hungary. And we know that the applications the application by migrants has gone up by about 1,236%. My question is, now with this new quota plan and countries, EU member states being mandated to take in these migrants, could it have economic consequences And by consequences, I mean, could it economically hurt countries like Hungary, who are not too keen on taking in more migrants?
Integration will be a key piece of the picture, of course. As you mentioned, there's been a huge rise in the number of people entering the EU, and some countries have more established integration mechanisms than others. And the economic benefits and consequences, of course, of immigration are very diffuse. It's difficult to track down exactly where those accrue. But at the same time, Europe is obviously facing a demographic decline and a need for more workers particularly in certain areas. So there is potential if countries are able to invest in language education, in training, in helping people to get the skills they need and the qualifications they need to enter the labor market. There is economic potential there for some of these newcomers to fill those gaps. But it'll be expensive and it will be a long-term effort. So countries like Hungary or Poland, who have less experience with this, will certainly need assistance and support from the rest of the European Union in taking advantage of the labor potential that refugees could bring.
Susan, thank you so much for joining us. We're very grateful for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Susan Fratsky. She's an international program policy analyst with the Migration Policy Institute. She was speaking to us from Washington, D.C. Still to come on Network Africa. We have the latest from Burkina Faso now that we hear that normalcy has been restored barely a week after a coup.